This video is not a review. Treat it as more of a highlight of features you're going to be seeing in Plasma 6.7. Maybe sometime down the line I'll do a separate video that is a proper review, but that is for later. So let's get it out of the way. This is the one time I'm going to mention it. Here is your new default wallpaper. This is the dark variant, and honestly, I do like the default KDE wallpapers. I actually think they look pretty good. This one is no exception. And here is the light variant. I don't know which one I prefer. I don't know. I think they both look pretty good. Either way, here you go. Now let's move on to important things. By far the most important thing for me, and the reason why I stopped using KDE Plasma, was the way that virtual desktops worked. Plasma did not have virtual desktops. It had virtual workspaces where if you changed the desktop on one monitor, all of your monitors change together. This is still the default setting, but there is now this option here in virtual desktops. Switch desktops independently for each screen. Enabling this feature, now it's going to work like Neri, like Hyperland, like i3, like every sensible window manager out there. And finally, using this environment is not going to annoy me. Also, if you like Cronkite, the tiling window manager plugin, or Carousel, the scrolling plugin, both of these are going to make way more sense now and feel like you're actually using a tiling window manager or a scrolling window manager. And this is honestly the main reason I have been considering going back to Plasma. But this is by no means the only things that are changing. Plasma added the ability to pre-authorize an application when you want to do remote desktop. This is a nice change. It means you don't actually have to be at the desktop when you want to enable a remote desktop. However, what they've also done now is added a notification when that is being done. So now if you actually go and use the application, you know that something is happening. Also, do you remember during the final part of the LTT Linux challenge where Elijah complained about if you type in sleep and then press enter, it just puts the system to sleep, which logically would make sense to me, but turns out somebody else was annoyed by this, and about a month ago, actually did go and fix this. So if Elijah happened to have been on the latest version of Plasma, this actually would never have happened as a problem. Another dumb little UX oversight is now fixed. So if we go and let's say open up KWrite, for example, and then I was to go and write something in it. Let's say like this, and then we go and copy that, and let's write some more and write this, and then we copy this right here. Now in our clipboard, we're going to have some entries. Okay, so let's say I want to go and let's say this one here is important. If we now go and clear the clipboard, it will empty the clipboard. Okay, but it doesn't empty what was starred. Previously, it would also ask if you wanted to delete the things that were starred. This was stupid, so now it doesn't. It just deletes everything that's not starred and keeps the starred things. ICC profiles can now be used when HDR is enabled. Now, I know this is like niche of a niche. This is color correction stuff with HDR, but if you happen to need that, now it works. There are a few applications that make use of the background apps portal. This is basically a portal for keeping track of applications that are running in the background, primarily being used by GNOME applications. These applications will now appear in your KDE sys tray alongside Discord, OBS, and any other things that logically make sense to have a system tray icon. So whilst GNOME itself might not have a sys tray, some of their applications will make use of one on KDE now, which I think is an improvement. Right now, and probably forever, it's only going to be a very small handful of applications as effects, like media players and things like that, but for those who need it, they now have it. Now, a real big change for people that care about zoom. When you zoomed in a lot on KDE, it got pretty difficult to use the environment because there wasn't any sort of attempt to improve the image quality of that high level of zoom. Now, though, if we go and zoom in a ton, we get to around this point here, you might start noticing it, there is an extreme sharpness filter. Now, it doesn't look great. It is a little bit hard to know what's going on. However, it is so much better than a hyper-pixelized bit of text at this point. This is way easier to see. Obviously, most of you are not zooming in this much, but for the people that need it, this is so much better. This was made by a dedicated accessibility dev in KDE. This is something he specifically needed himself, and frankly, this seems like a big improvement to me. One thing you might recall in KDE is the legacy X11 app support. This is how you go and let X11 apps that are running through Xwayland access your keyboard, do global shortcuts, things of that nature. But they've now added a new setting in here, control of pointer and keyboard. Now, if an application like, say, XDO2, and I wanted to go and control your keyboard and mouse, now it can ask you for permission, and also, if you want to deny permission to it, you can do that. At any point, you can reject permission, but if you just don't want to deal with it full stop, you can just say, allow everything without asking permission, and treat it just like X11. Basically giving you more control over how you want your X11 applications to actually function. If you don't have an internet connection and you go and open Discover, now it gives you a far better warning about the problem, now just saying, hey, you don't have an internet connection, connect to a network to install things. You may recall the recent discussions about a new XDG default directory, that being projects, that can now be configured in KDE under the location section right here. Inside of our application menu here, if we search for some sort of action, say for example, screen to find start and stop screen recording with Spectacle. This can now be marked as a favorite if we want to use it on a frequent basis. This can then be found in the same place as all of the other applications you have favorited right here. Alongside Firefox, we have start and stop recording, and it works like the rest of them would. A bug has now been fixed where you could drag windows off your screen and lose them basically forever. That is now done, and hopefully, you shouldn't be able to do it anymore. Until someone finds another workaround. If you make use of a virtual keyboard, you can now configure what will actually trigger it. Here we have Plasma Keyboard. Right now it is set to never, but you can set it to with touch and tablet or with touch, tablet, and mouse. So if you set it to that one, then your mouse is going to be able to enable it as well. There's not many cases where you might want to do that, but it is there. On the topic of Plasma Keyboard, if you have it set, you don't have to have it set to show it, but just have it set to be enabled. And then we go into an application like, say, Kwrite. Now we can go and create alternate characters. So if I hold down the E key, now we can see the different forms. I can either go and click these, or I can press the number associated with it. So let's say I want the third form, press 3, and there we go. If you had these keys on your keyboard, you could have always typed these. If you were using an IM, you could always type these. Now there's something built directly into Plasma. If you make use of screen recording, if we go and right-click a window, go to More Actions, we can now hide from screenshots and screen recording. This can be done with any application you want. I recently saw this with Niri, I believe was the first one I saw it, but now this is becoming more and more of a standard feature, and this, super cool. If you record your screen and you make use of something like the Bitwarden desktop client, you never want that to be seen, this can be done. I wouldn't fully rely on it. Testing is still being done, so it might break, but assuming this works properly, this is super cool. If you prefer, that can also be done with a window rule as well. If a GPU is currently in use and you're looking at your system monitor, now the GPU is being correctly reported instead of just as a string of numbers. Kwin now has support for the Session Management Protocol. This is one piece of the equation for fully supported working session restoration. Now it is up to the applications and the toolkits to do the rest of the chain. But we are very close to just full session restoration. You come back to your system, you restart your system, things crash, and everything goes back to the way it was. If for some reason you want it, your window switcher, the Alt-Tab window, you can now have it set to only appear on your primary display. The way it does it by default is whatever display you are currently active on. I don't know why you'd want primary display, but you can. Mic testing is now built directly into the sound widget. So if we go and click on the widget, we have this option right here. We can then go and record something, play it back, and then see what level it's going to be at. Whilst we still have to see the screen capture prompt way too often, at least now it's going to be a little bit prettier. Honestly, it's a nice improvement. It's a very basic improvement having the wallpaper color in the background, but it's nice. time zone deltas can now be seen in the clock. So I have both my time zone and Sydney, it's 30 minutes later, and if you were to add any others in here, you could see those as well. So if you like to talk to people from various parts of the world and you don't want to do the math on the time zone difference, now it'll just show you. A dumb little bug has been fixed where Electron applications would all use the same system tray setting even though they are different applications. Why they did that? Nobody knows. This has been fixed in upstream Electron, but as is normal with Electron, a lot of applications take a long time to install things, so it's been fixed in KDE, and hopefully at some point these applications just fix it themselves. Inside of the window overview, ignore the fact that it's laggy, this is a laggy virtual machine. Now, if you want to go and change the desktop you're on, you don't just have to click it. Now you can scroll, or you can use page up and page down. Again, the virtual machine is very laggy. It's going to not be like this on actual hardware. For some reason, and I don't really know why, mouse cursor position and tablet cursor position were stored as two different values. So if you moved somewhere with your tablet and then you touched your mouse, instead of continuing off from where the tablet was, it continues from where the mouse was last used. Now you don't have to do that. You can disable that. It was a dumb setting. I don't know why it was like that. Now when you quit a frozen application, it gives you a bit of a visual indication that something is happening rather than thinking the quit prompt has also frozen. There were parts of Kwin that made use of an incorrect scrolling delta, meaning those interfaces scrolled at about 8 times slower than they should have. That's now been fixed, so everything scrolls at the speed that you have set. If you set padding between windows with the tiling editor, that setting is now remembered per screen as the interface implies that it should have been. It was just applying one global setting when that's not what it said. In the emoji selector, when there's an emoji that has skin tone variants, those will now be listed as subversions of that emoji, which deals with a lot of the clutter that modern Unicode has. Now, they probably could deal with a lot more of this by merging the gendered versions together and merging some of like the different colored versions together. Some of these probably could still be collapsed down to iron out some of the absolute clutter here, but it is at least a step in the right direction. Inside of the brightness widget, there is now a toggle for light and dark mode. So if you like swapping manually every so often, that can be done. Now, of course, you could always just go and swap at a certain time of day, or like me, never swap. But if you want to, you can. In your shortcuts, we now have a global push-to-talk setting. So whilst we are waiting for applications like Discord to actually make use of the portal, this will basically deal with the problem. Personally, I don't really do that much where I care about push-to-talk, but if you really, really want it, KDE is there for you. Some of these changes we've been looking at are very, very recent changes, only up until a couple of days ago, so even though they technically kind of hit a freeze, things were still being adjusted, and things are still getting better and better. Now, there is a lot more things we could talk about here, but I don't think either you or I want to be here for about 3 hours listing out performance changes. If you want to go see a full list of changelog things, I'll leave this link down below. There is a bunch of random little things you can look at. Most of it is probably going to be, I don't even know, or I don't even care. But maybe you find something in there that you really care about. If you want a bit of a shorter list, though, most of the stuff I talked about here came from going through this week in Plasma, going back through each of the iterations and seeing what neat things were being highlighted. Also, you can go and see the features that KDE themselves want to go and highlight on their wiki under the Plasma 6.7 section. Most of this stuff we have already talked about, though. But there are a few things we didn't talk about, that being the return of air and oxygen. These were the light and dark theme of KDE 4, and they're not perfect yet. There is still work to bring them in line with the changes made for Plasma 6 whilst keeping in line with that old design language, but now you can install them for this modern version and have them actually reasonably work. Also, this is the first version that we are seeing Union in the wild. Union is an attempt to basically bring together, to unify the disparate KDE styling systems. It's still very far away from doing that, but it can be tested out under the application style. Do note, it is not ready. There's a reason why they're not using it by default, but it is there to play with. Also, this is the first release with the return of Plasma Big Screen. Now, I would show you Plasma Big Screen running. However, the KDE Neon ISO was constantly crashing at startup. Thank you, KDE Neon. I love KDE Neon. It's great. Yeah. Anyway, thankfully, Phoronix has an article from a month ago. Basically, what this is Plasma for a media PC, Plasma for a TV, and yeah, there's still some things here which are not perfect, like the file manager is literally just Dolphin. It is not a file manager made for use on a TV. But overall, the interface is getting there. This is an ancient project which was never actually initially finished. It was only like half kind of worked on. The design documents were there, but the implementation was never properly done. So new maintainers came along, they wanted to revive it, and now it's actually here, and you can actually play with it, and it's far from perfect. But if this keeps along, this very well could be a very different way of using Plasma, and honestly, I think it's super cool to have desktops being made, to have environments being made that are not just made for a PC or a laptop, actually experimenting with things and seeing what can be done. So it is time to jump into Plasma 6.7, give it a shot, give it a go. Maybe your distro doesn't have it just yet, but it will soon-ish, unless you're on Debian or SteamOS or various other things. But if you're on something that's fast-moving, you'll have it pretty soon. Yeah. Anyway, that's going to be it for today. You're probably going to see more Plasma on this channel over the next couple of months. I am very heavily wanting to get back into it and make sure Carousel still works with 6.7 and go from there. So, if you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well, and if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribes, Daily Bearer Pay, link in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and Plasma is the fourth state of matter.